the man from nowhere. Rio Mavuba possesses a birth certificate that remains unique in the history of professional football. Where most documents list a specific hospital or city, his bears a strange, almost cinematic designation, born at sea. In March 1984, his parents were fleeing the brutality of the Angolan Civil War. Somewhere in the cold expanse of international waters, adrift on a small refugee boat, Mavuba entered the world. Because he was born outside of any nation's jurisdiction, he was born without a country. For the next 20 years, Mavuba was stateless, although he was raised in France and developed into a formidable midfielder. He existed in a legal void. He technically belonged nowhere. He held no passport, only a travel document for refugees. This made his early career a logistical minefield. Even as he became one of the best prospects in the league, he was ineligible for national selection. While his teammates breezed through customs for European fixtures, Mavuba faced endless scrutiny and red tape just to cross a border. The uncertainty only ended in 2004 when he was finally granted French citizenship. The transformation was profound. He went from a legal ghost to the captain of Lille and a key figure for Les Bleus. His career culminated at the World Cup, marking the end of an impossible journey. The child born in the empty ocean had finally found a nation to fight for. The ostrich meltdown. April 2015. Leicester City was fighting for its life near the bottom of the table, and manager Nigel Pearson was clearly feeling the heat. Press conferences are usually scripted affairs. Managers speak in safe cliches to keep the headlines boring. But on this night, Pearson didn't want to be boring. He wanted a fight. When journalist Ian Baker asked a fairly standard question about the criticism the squad was facing, Pearson didn't deflect. He stared the man down with genuine disdain and launched a personal dismantling. He called Baker stupid. He called him daft. Then he delivered the most bizarre insult in Premier League history. "I think you are an ostrich." The room froze. Pearson wasn't laughing. He accused the reporter of having his head in the sand, aggressively questioning his flexibility and intelligence while the cameras rolled. It was raw, uncomfortable bullying broadcast live to the nation. He mocked the reporter's competence and demanded respect while showing none. This wasn't mind games or a tactical distraction. It was the sound of a man cracking under the crushing weight of the relegation battle. Instead of answering a question, he turned the press room into a wildlife documentary, proving that when the pressure gets too high, even Premier League managers can lose their grip on reality. The captain who walked alone. Paolo Maldini gave AC Milan 25 years, 902 matches, and 5 Champions League trophies. He was the definition of loyalty in a sport that rarely sees it. But when he took his final lap of honour around the San Siro in May 2009, the Ultras didn't cheer, they attacked. It was supposed to be a coronation, but it turned into an ambush. As he waved goodbye, the Curva Sud unfurled a massive banner that read, "There is only one captain." They weren't talking about him. They were honouring Franco Baresi, a calculated public attempt to erase Maldini's legacy in his final moments. They hadn't forgiven him for calling them mercenaries years earlier when they protested the team after a loss. He had refused to bow to them then, and they made him pay for it now. But the real knife in the back didn't come from the stands, it came from the owner's box. The club hierarchy stayed silent. No defence, no statement, no support. They let their greatest legend stand alone against the mob while the cameras rolled. Maldini didn't just retire that day, he exiled himself. He refused to step foot in the club's management for nearly a decade, rejecting every offer until the ownership changed completely. He wouldn't work for people who wouldn't protect him. He wasn't holding a grudge, he was holding a standard. The Bernabeu mugging. On April 21st, 2009, Real Madrid hosted Getafe at the Santiago Bernabeu. The fixture held critical implications for the La Liga title race, but the athletic contest was overshadowed by an incident in the 87th minute. As Getafe midfielder Javier Casquero advanced into the penalty area, Real Madrid defender Pepe pushed him to the ground to concede a penalty. The sequence immediately escalated beyond the parameters of a sporting foul. Instead of accepting the referee's whistle, Pepe initiated a physical assault on the defenceless player. Broadcast footage documented the defender kicking Casquero twice in rapid succession. The video showed Pepe raking his boot studs across the opponent's back before striking another Getafe player, Juan Albin, in the face during the subsequent disorder. The aggression garnered immediate condemnation from match officials and observers alike. Following a review, the Spanish Football Federation handed down a 10-match suspension, recording one of the most severe disciplinary sanctions in the history of the modern competition. The suspension removed Pepe from the pitch, but the footage created a lasting legacy. For the remainder of his career, the assault on Casquero stood as the definitive reference point for his disciplinary record. The outburst demonstrated a level of volatility that critics argued separated his technical defensive skills from his temperament, permanently altering his standing in European football. The grip of terror. February 6th, 1988, Newcastle United against Wimbledon. On one side, you had Paul Gascoigne, a 20-year-old prodigy dazzling the league with his skill. On the other, Vinnie Jones, the designated hitman for the notorious Crazy Gang. Jones wasn't sent out to mark Gascoigne. He was sent out to terrorise him. From the first whistle, Jones ignored the ball completely. He shadowed Gaza, whispering threats, breathing down his neck. Then came the moment that turned into folklore. As a free kick was lining up, Jones didn't throw an elbow or crunch into a tackle. He reached back, grabbed Gascoigne's testicles with a vice-like grip, and didn't let go. A photographer caught the exact split-second reaction. The image is visceral. Jones's face is twisted into a snarl of pure aggression, while Gascoigne is frozen in a scream of total shock and pain. It remains one of football's most iconic photographs because it captures something raw. It wasn't a play on the ball, it was a street fight on grass. Jones later said he just wanted to introduce himself. He did more than that. He created the definitive image of English football's hard man era, proving that for Wimbledon, the mental game was just as violent as the physical one. The invisible opponent. Ray Kennedy presented a physical paradox in English football. He possessed the formidable build of a heavyweight fighter, yet his contribution to Liverpool relied on technical precision. He anchored the midfield during the club's era of continental dominance, accumulating a vast collection of domestic and European trophies. However, his physical capacity collapsed immediately following his departure from the sport. At age 35, doctors diagnosed him with Parkinson's disease. Retrospective analysis indicated the diagnosis was overdue rather than sudden. Specialists reviewed broadcast footage from the late 1970s and concluded that Kennedy had competed with the condition for years. The visual evidence documents the progression of the disease during his athletic prime. In the recordings, Kennedy runs with his right arm pinned motionless against his hip. His stride exhibits a consistent drag, and his torso maintains an unnatural rigidity. Supporters originally interpreted these mechanics as stylistic idiosyncrasies. Medical review confirms they were motor symptoms of neurological degeneration. Kennedy performed at the summit of European football while his nervous system progressively deteriorated. He executed tackles and scored goals against the resistance of his own physiology, securing the sport's highest honours while unknowingly competing with an incurable brain disease. Sebastian Deisler. To the German public, Sebastian Deisler was more than a talented playmaker. He was the desperate hope of a nation facing a footballing identity crisis. Dubbed Das Supertalent, he emerged in the early 2000s when the national team looked old and unimaginative. Deisler was the spark. Consequently, Bayern Munich and the fans projected all their anxieties onto him. They expected him to single-handedly resurrect German pride, a weight that would eventually crush him. While the tabloids focused entirely on his fragile knees, Deisler was fighting a much darker battle in private. The relentless pressure triggered severe depression, forcing him into psychiatric care. He famously described his existence as that of a sad clown performing tricks for the audience while feeling completely empty inside. In January 2007, he stopped the show. At 27, the age when a midfielder should be dominating Europe, Deisler walked away. He didn't retire because his leg gave out or for a sudden payout. He quit because he could no longer wage the war in his head. He told the press that the ruthless business of the Bundesliga had killed his joy. In a move that shocked the sports world, He left millions of euros and a guaranteed legacy behind, deciding that saving German football simply wasn't worth losing his mind. The most expensive budget cut in history. Jesus Hill wasn't just a football owner, he was a walking natural disaster. The Atletico Madrid boss was known for his volatility, corruption scandals, and riding a horse to the stadium. But his greatest crime against his own club wasn't legal. It was financial stupidity. In 1992, looking to trim the budget, Gil looked at the club's youth academy. He decided it was a waste of money, so he shut it down. He effectively fired the future to save some loose change. It was a decision that would haunt Atletico for 2 decades, because among the kids he kicked out onto the street was a 15-year-old named Raul Gonzalez. With his team dissolved, Raul simply walked across the city and signed with bitter rivals Real Madrid. He didn't just make the team. Raul became the face of Real Madrid, their captain and their all-time leading scorer at the time, tormenting Atletico in nearly every derby for the next 16 years. Gil wanted to save a few pesetas. Instead, he gifted his enemy their greatest weapon. It remains the single worst business decision in the history of Spanish football. The giant in handcuffs. In 2012, Glasgow Rangers encountered a financial collapse that effectively dismantled the corporate structure of Scotland's most decorated football institution. Following a period of administration caused by unmanageable debt, the club entered liquidation. The process transferred the assets to a new company, but the football governing bodies enforced severe regulatory consequences. Despite a history spanning 140 years and 54 league titles, the club was denied entry to the top flight. Instead, the Scottish Football League members voted to admit the reformed entity into the 3rd division, the 4th and lowest tier of the national pyramid. The demotion was accompanied by a restrictive 12-month transfer embargo. The sanctions prohibited the club from registering any new professional players over the age of 18, severely limiting the ability to reconstruct the squad. Rangers, accustomed to European nights and Old Firm derbies, found themselves competing against semi-professional opposition in regional venues. The disparity was stark. The club hosted matches at Ibrox Stadium with crowds exceeding 40,000 while visiting grounds with capacities in the hundreds. The recovery process required 4 seasons of competition to navigate the divisional hierarchy. Rangers finally secured promotion back to the Scottish Premiership in 2016. The 4-year exile remains a singular event in modern football, illustrating the absolute fragility of even the most established sporting organisations when faced with fiscal insolvency. The homeless giant slayer, Alireza Bayramvand, secured his position in elite football through a path defined by extreme poverty. As a teenager, he left his family home in rural Iran after his father forbade him from pursuing a career in the sport. Bayramvand arrived in Tehran with no capital and spent his initial weeks sleeping on the concrete pavement outside the gates of a local football club. To survive while attending tryouts, he relied on a series of manual labour jobs. He worked in a dressmaking factory and a pizza shop, but his height determined his primary employment. Bayramvand took a position at a car wash, where his large frame made him the specialist for scrubbing the roofs of SUVs. This period of homelessness and labour preceded his selection for the 2018 World Cup in Russia. In a critical group stage match against Portugal, the referee awarded a penalty kick to Cristiano Ronaldo. The moment placed Bayramvand directly against the reigning World Player of the Year. The goalkeeper correctly read the striker's intent, diving low to his left to catch the ball and deny the conversion. The save preserved a draw for the Iranian national team. The intervention on the global stage underscored the magnitude of his ascent, marking the transition from sleeping on the streets of Tehran to stopping a penalty from the sport's most dominant forward. The assault on the touchline. August 23rd, 2006. Manchester City versus Portsmouth. The ball was bouncing toward the sideline. A harmless moment in a standard game. Then Ben Thatcher turned it into a crime scene. As Pedro Mendes ran to clear the ball, Thatcher didn't decelerate. He locked on. He delivered a sprinting, calculated elbow directly into Mendes' jaw. The impact was horrific. Mendes was unconscious before his body even hit the grass, sliding helplessly, violently into the advertising boards. The scene on the sideline turned into a medical emergency immediately. Mendes suffered a seizure while medics frantically administered oxygen, rushing him to the hospital with severe head trauma. But the true insanity happened on the pitch. The referee reached into his pocket and showed Thatcher a yellow card, a caution for an act that looked more like a cage fight than football. The crowd was stunned. Mendes was fighting for consciousness in an ambulance while his attacker was still jogging around the midfield. The backlash was nuclear. Manchester City suspended their own player before the FA could even open the file. To this day, the footage is hard to watch a split second where the sport completely vanished, replaced by an act of pure violence. The man who played in armour, Ivan Klasnic, returned to elite football following a medical crisis that typically ends careers. In 2007, while playing at his peak for Werder Bremen, his body quietly turned on him. It wasn't a typical sports injury like a torn ACL. It was total kidney failure. His organs were shutting down in plain sight. The first attempt to fix it was a nightmare. His mother donated a kidney, but Klasnic's body rejected it almost immediately. That is usually where the career ends. The physical toll of rejection combined with the heavy immune-suppressing drugs should have forced him into retirement, but Klasnic refused to fold. He went back under the knife for a second transplant, this time receiving a kidney from his father. What happened next defies medical logic. Less than a year later, he wasn't just living. He was starting for Croatia at Euro 2008. He played with a custom-made fiberglass belt strapped under his jersey, a literal shield to protect the donor organ. One bad tackle in the wrong spot could have been catastrophic. Yet, he didn't just survive the contact. He scored 2 goals in the tournament. He became the first player in history to compete at a major international finals with a transplanted kidney, proving he could beat the best defenders in Europe and his own anatomy at the same time. The ghost who won the World Cup. In 1980, Italian football authorities implicated Paolo Rossi in the Totonero match-fixing scandal. The federation handed the striker a 3-year ban, later reduced to 2 years, effectively removing him from professional competition during his athletic prime. Throughout the suspension, Rossi maintained his innocence, but the sanction isolated him from the sport. His exclusion seemed absolute until his eligibility was restored just weeks prior to the 1982 World Cup. National team manager Enzo Bearzot selected Rossi for the squad, despite his lack of recent match practice. The decision provoked intense scepticism from the Italian media, who argued the striker was unfit for the intensity of international play. Rossi initially struggled, failing to score in the early group matches. This trajectory changed in the second round against Brazil. Rossi scored a hat-trick to eliminate the tournament favourites, followed by 2 goals in the semi-final and the opening strike in the final against West Germany. He finished the tournament with the Golden Boot, the Golden Ball, and the World Cup trophy. The performance completed a total rehabilitation of his image, shifting his status from a suspended outcast to the decisive figure in Italy's victory. The street to the stratosphere. Bebe's path to the Premier League didn't start on a pristine academy pitch. It started in a church-run shelter outside Lisbon. Abandoned by his parents as a child, Tiago Manuel Dias Correa, better known as Bebe, spent his youth not worrying about contracts, but about survival. He lived in a homeless shelter for 8 years. His training ground was the concrete. He was so far off the grid that he was initially selected for the Homeless World Cup team, not a national youth squad. Then the universe glitched. In the span of just 5 weeks, he went from playing in the Portuguese 3rd Division to the front page of every paper in England. Sir Alex Ferguson, the most meticulous manager in history, signed him for roughly £7 million. Here is the crazy part. Ferguson later admitted he had never even seen him play. He went from living in a shelter to wearing the Manchester United badge in barely a month. It remains one of the most baffling transfers in football history. A street footballer plucked a golden ticket out of thin air, proving that sometimes talent doesn't need an address to be found. The stolen identity. Following the conclusion of the 2015 to 2016 campaign, Anthony Martial established himself as a central figure within the Manchester United squad. The French forward finished the season as the club's top scorer and held the number 9 jersey, a designation traditionally reserved for the team's primary centre-forward. His standing appeared secure until the organisation signed Zlatan Ibrahimovic in July 2016. The arrival of the Swedish veteran precipitated an immediate and controversial administrative decision regarding squad allocations. Manchester United management unilaterally assigned the number 9 shirt to Ibrahimovic. Multiple reports indicated that the club executed this transfer without consulting Martial or offering a negotiation period. The forward allegedly discovered the loss of his number through the club's public social media announcement rather than via internal communication. The mandate forced Martial to vacate the position and switch to number 11. This alteration carried specific commercial consequences, as it compelled him to abandon his personal AM9 branding strategy just as it launched. Martial's agent publicly criticised the methodology, labelling the decision disrespectful and hurtful to the player. The incident illustrated a distinct prioritisation of commercial impact over squad seniority. By stripping the team's leading scorer of his number to accommodate a marquee free agent, the administration demonstrated that the marketing potential of Ibrahimovic superseded Martial's contributions. The decision created a lingering friction that characterised the remainder of Martial's tenure at Old Trafford. Graham Poll, the referee who forgot how to count. In the history of the World Cup, there is one rule that is absolute. 2 yellow cards equal a red. It's basic math. But in 2006, England's top referee, Graham Poll, decided to rewrite the rulebook. During a chaotic match between Croatia and Australia, Poll was losing control. In the 61st minute, he booked Croatian defender Josip Šimunić. Standard procedure. In the 91st minute, Šimunić committed another foul. Poll reached into his pocket, pulled out the yellow card again, and nothing happened. He wrote it down, but his brain glitched. He didn't show the red. He let a player with 2 bookings stay on the pitch. The game continued in a surreal state of error until the 93rd minute. Šimunić, perhaps confused why he was still playing, argued with Poll again. For the 3rd time, Poll showed him a yellow. Finally, the red came out. It was the only time in World Cup history a player has been sent off for 3 yellow cards. Poll wasn't corrupt. He just had the most public brain fade in sports history. The mistake was so humiliating that he was sent home from the tournament immediately, proving that even at the elite level, sometimes the pressure makes you forget how to count to 2. Michael Johnson, the star who chose silence. In 2007, Michael Johnson was widely considered the future of the English national team. Sven-Göran Eriksson famously described him as the complete midfielder, and for a brief window at Manchester City, he looked the part. He was dynamic, powerful, and technically gifted the jewel of the academy. But while the expectations were sky high, Johnson was quietly falling apart. Recurring abdominal injuries kept him off the pitch, but the real damage was invisible. The toxic environment of professional football, the intense scrutiny and constant pressure triggered severe mental health struggles. He later admitted that he was trapped in a life he didn't want, playing a role that made him miserable. By 2012, at just 24, he walked away. He didn't announce a retirement tour, he simply disappeared. When a photo surfaced years later showing him looking unfit, the tabloids were cruel, branding him a waste of talent. They missed the point entirely. Johnson eventually broke his silence to reveal that leaving football was a survival decision. He traded the Premier League lifestyle for peace of mind. He remains one of English football's great what-ifs, not because he failed, but because he realised that the cost of stardom was his own sanity. Cristiano Ronaldo, the number 7 shirt at Real Madrid, carries a weight that doesn't exist at other clubs. It belongs to the icons Juanito, Butragueño, Raúl, and eventually Cristiano Ronaldo. When Ronaldo left for Juventus in 2018 as the club's all-time top scorer, the shirt was suddenly vacant. Most fans assumed Madrid would wait for a new Galactico before reassigning it, out of respect for the legacy Ronaldo left behind. Instead, the board made a decision that felt like a deliberate insult. Weeks after Ronaldo packed his bags, they handed the most prestigious jersey in football to Mariano Diaz. Mariano had just returned from Lyon. He was a solid striker, but he was a squad player, not a global icon. Seeing him wear the shirt Ronaldo had just vacated felt jarring. It wasn't just a sporting decision, it felt like a calculated power move from Florentino Perez. By giving the number to a backup immediately after Ronaldo's exit, the president sent a cold, unmistakable message to his former star. Players come and go, legends are replaceable, and the Real Madrid crest will always be bigger than the name on the back. The push that stopped the league. On September 26, 1998, a Premier League fixture at Hillsborough produced a historic breach of professional conduct. Sheffield Wednesday striker Paolo Di Canio became involved in a heated altercation with Arsenal defender Martin Keown. When match official Paul Alcock intervened to restore order and issued a red card for the aggression, the situation escalated beyond a standard disciplinary matter. Di Canio refused to accept the dismissal. Instead, he stepped toward the official and shoved him in the chest. The force of the push caused Alcock to stumble backward and fall to the pitch in full view of the stadium and television cameras. The incident violated the absolute prohibition against physical contact with match officials. While players frequently engaged in verbal dissent, Di Canio's decision to physically target the referee crossed a clearly defined regulatory line. The Football Association viewed the event as a direct attack on the authority of the game itself. The governing body responded with a severe sanction, imposing an 11-match suspension and a £10,000 fine on the Italian forward. The punishment was designed to set a deterrent against any future physical intimidation of officials. This punishment set the modern standard. Shout all you want, but if you touch the official, your season is effectively over.